Pat Mahomes. I think this is the only current player on the list. Some of you gonna say, of course, when you see this, and I'm gonna release this on Twitter. Some of you gonna say, well, Peyton Manning, well, Dan Marino, all these other guys should be higher than Mahomes. I don't think so. Mahomes, then first, if 2025 is the year where he doesn't make the AFC Championship, that'll be his first as a starter. I think it's 7 or 8 straight AFC Championship games. Already has Super Bowl win, multiple Super Bowl wins, has a back-to-back Super Bowl win. I think, especially too in recent years, he is the reason they're winning. I don't think there's any question about it. The only thing with Mahomes, there has been some slippage on his dominance in terms of stats in the last year or two. You could say Lamar Jackson was better. You could say Josh Allen was better in terms of stats the last year or two. But he's been phenomenal. I think this is one of the greatest top 20 players of all time. I think he's really the only current player on the list. So Pat Mahomes, I have him at 20 as well. Mean Joe Greene. Sometimes I'm going to say some of these guys were my mom's favorite players or these guys, but she would always talk about how Joe Greene was. And Joe Greene was, I think, one of the few Steelers jerseys that's retired. That's saying something. They only have 3 jerseys, which is ridiculous. They don't have Bradshaw and a lot of these. That's a whole other thing. But Mean Joe Greene, I think, changed the way it was played football. That's one of the reasons why Joe Greene is on the list. Joe Greene, I think, the reason the term sack exists is for Mean Joe Greene. So it really, he almost predated that, I think, as far as the term sack. But Mean Joe Greene, I think, was a guy who changed the way he played, highly successful. You could have a whole bunch of Steelers on that list from the 70s, the successful run, one of the most successful runs in the history of the NFL, the 1970 Steelers. So Mean Joe Greene, I have him at number 19. I have him just a hair behind the great Marilyn Olsen. When I was little, Marilyn Olsen was an actor. He was on Little House on the Prairie. He was one of the number 1 announcers along with Dick Enberg on NBC. So he was a very good player. And I think Marilyn Olsen, I don't think there's been a better defensive tackle in the history of the NFL. So tackle isn't, I don't think, probably in part, but kind of worked against him being higher. I don't think it's as big a priority on the field as well, stopping the run, especially in the modern, especially compared to the modern NFL. But I got no problem putting Marilyn Olsen in the top 20. I think this is the best defensive tackle in the history of the NFL. A little bit better than Joe Greene, a little bit better than Aaron Donald, etc. I think I'm still going to have Marilyn Olsen. I think the fearsome foursome of the Rams, I think, is probably, maybe the greatest defensive front in the history of the NFL, one of them. So definitely is hard though to have 17. Ronnie Lott, I think, probably the greatest hitter ever at the safety position, and that's saying something. Lott really just changed your life, put the fear of God in you when you were running, when you were doing things. Lott, I think nobody hit harder than Ronnie Lott, period. Ronnie Lott, the rules now have changed. You talk about changing the game. Ronnie Lott, the reason why the guys nowadays run over the middle is the hits like a guy like Ronnie Lott was hitting on you. You were just terrified. Guys didn't even run over the middle like that. A lot of you younger fans probably don't even realize, like, when you look at guys running over the middle of the field, Ronnie Lott was going to kill you, literally. Like, lay you out, put you on the stretcher. Nobody was more feared than Ronnie Lott. I think he's the greatest hitter that's probably ever at the safety position as well. He's good in coverage as well. I think everybody talks about the hitting because he was such a vicious hitter, but he was good in coverage. Defense was very good. Those Niner defenses were very underrated during the years that he was there. So Ronnie Lott, number 17. Number 16, Johnny U. Johnny Unitas, I think. I don't think might be one of the most underrated players in the history of the NFL as we go. I think Johnny Unitas is the top 5 quarterback all time. I think the reason the Colts were a good team back then, it was probably not only because of Johnny Unitas, but they were really a dynasty that weren't. But Unitas was so good for so many years, in Baltimore as the Colts quarterback, winning Super Bowl V, getting the team to Super Bowl III. He was a passer in the league at the time. It really stuck out because most of the league was a running league, running the ball, running backs and fullbacks got carries and things like that. And Unitas was the passer. He would actually throw the ball long in an era where you didn't see a lot of that. So Unitas really, in a strange way, got things to change because with his ability to throw the football. So I have Johnny Unitas at 16 there as well. Number 15, Sweetness. Walter Payton is there. I don't think there was a better the Bears won the championship in 85, and everybody talks about how great their defense was, the Super Bowl shuffle in the refrigerator. But guess who was there on offense was, I think, probably for the longest time, I thought was the best running back in the history of my lifetime was Walter Payton. Guys, I can see it now. Walter jumping over the pile into the end zone. First guy to do that. Really leap over the pile, leap over, get into the end zone. Sweetness, move real. It was just such a joy to watch Walter Payton run the football. So shout out to the late Walter Payton as well. Dominant in an area of great running backs. There was a lot of great running backs too in the 80s when he played. But Walter Payton really stood out. You saw a lot of bigger guys like a Eric Dickerson and those like that. This was the sweetness. Right? This was the runner. This was the speed. He had power as well. Don't get me wrong. Toughness playing in Chicago. But Walter Payton, I think, number 15 as well. Kind of the first two-way back. The guy who could run the ball out of the back, catch the ball out of the backfield, really changed the game. Anthony Munoz. As much as I love Jonathan Ogden, I don't think he was as good as Anthony Munoz was at tackle. I think there's a decent gap between him and everybody else here. Ogden, I would have him kind of top 50 list. I definitely have him, but Anthony Munoz was in a class by himself. Never needed help. All pro automatically. You see him right there protecting the blind side of Boomer Esiason. Always just a phenomenal tackle. I think like this. He was the guy that really people noticed, like you talked about changing the game. After the injury to Joe Theismann years ago in the Monday Night Football game, and it was protect the blind side, protect what the quarterback can't see coming after Lawrence Taylor injured him. The guy that everybody wanted was Anthony Munoz, right? Anthony Munoz, who was a guy who actually protected the blind side by himself. No help. Doesn't matter who the rush is. Anthony Munoz, number 14 on the list. Anthony Munoz was phenomenal tackle on the list. Dick Buckus. You know, you talk about sweetness and the Chicago and the toughness and all that. This Dick Buckus embodied toughness in Chicago. Look at that helmet, the old school bar set down the middle. That's what Dick Buckus was. Dick Buckus was a tough guy, man. Maybe he's the worst athlete on this list in terms of athleticism, but he just, again, fear. You were just so terrified of a Dick Buckus on the field. He just hit the Bears. The reason why he's not a little bit higher maybe is the Bears weren't very good the years he was there, but that didn't stop Dick Buckus from being a phenomenal inside linebacker, middle linebacker. The Bears have a history of it. They had Mike Singletary or whatever, but this guy was the guy that everybody feared. Just a tough, physical guy. You didn't run in his area. Dick Buckus would just take. I mean, the term decleating. If you ever heard that term where guys get knocked off their cleats or decleat or whatever, it was Dick Buckus. Go ahead and watch the film of Dick Buckus, and you will see the term decleating as well. Buckus, I think, at number 13. Going the wrong way, though. Number 12, Ray Lewis. I think the mantle I talk about was from Dick Buckus. This was the phenomenal athlete, Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis, there isn't a Ray Lewis in the ring right now. Ray Lewis, I think, you don't see teams that have leadership on an entire football team in the most part at middle linebacker. I think Ray Lewis might have been the greatest leader in the history of the NFL, non-quarterback or maybe at any position. I think Ray Lewis was a leader of teams that won. His defense actually catapulted the team. A lot of his career, not a lot of offense. Automatically had the league in tackles, over 100 plus tackles. Tom Brady said this was the player he feared more than any other player. His defenses were always top 10. I think the only time the Ravens defense was outside of the top 10 in his whole career, I think, was his last season or seasons, I think, where he missed a lot of games. But I think this might be I don't know if he's the most feared, but certainly when you talk about closer to the modern era, the 2000s, I don't think there was a more feared guy than Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis changed the whole thing in terms of how people look at the middle linebacker position. Number 7, John Elway is number 11 on the list, but it's weird too. It's hard not to think of the 7 when Elway. I don't know why his number is more synonymous with him. I don't know than even some of these other players on this list, but Elway, I thought was just God-given, just God-given. What they tell you not to do as a quarterback, Elway could do all of those things. Hey, don't take the ball, run one way, and throw across your body and expect to have success. Hey, don't go ahead and run off the pre-snap and whatever if you don't have great. Elway was just so God-given as well. Now, the only thing I would say with Elway, maybe he's not on the list without the 2 Super Bowls at the end of the career. That's a possibility, maybe. But I think everything else was there. All the stats. I thought he was an outstanding running quarterback. Not great speed, but his teams always won. It was Denver a lot of years without a lot of talent outside of the passing game. But he did actually go ahead and win the Super Bowl. At the end, I think he was a guy. He got his teams to Super Bowl, I think, 6 times. Elway, I think, was the biggest difference in the Denver in the history of the Broncos. I think John Elway, number 7. I can't do it again. Number 11, I knew I would do that on the list. John Elway, 11th greatest player of all time. Number 10 is the great Reggie White. Kind of think of him as a Packer for whatever reason more than he was with the Eagles. Even though I think the Eagles, were a lot of his prime years. But I think Reggie White was had the most unstoppable move in the history of the league, and that's the club move on defense. I think, you just didn't have a chance. He was just going to knock you over. He hit you with that club move, and that was it. Reggie White was strong at the point of attack. Maybe the understatement to say that he was strong at the point of attack. Maybe one of the strongest players in the history of the NFL at the point of attack. I think Reggie White, is maybe the greatest defensive end in the history of the NFL. I mean, one of the greatest players in the history of the league. So I think Reggie, phenomenal power and strength. Reggie White, I think I have him at 10. Had more success. Think of him more as a Packer. I think that's when they won the Super Bowl. I think that's maybe the height. I think also to free agency, not necessarily business change in the game, but there's another guy I want to talk about business as well. But the free agency that you see now in the NFL was really started by Reggie White. Wasn't a lot of free agency as well. Him going from Philadelphia to Green Bay, fighting and go ahead and getting the free agent. I think this is maybe the most impactful free agent in the history of the NFL. Either him or Drew Brees. I'll go ahead and if you want to say Drew Brees. But I think, no question about it, Reggie White, top 10. Emmit Smith, number 9. All-time leading rusher in the history of the NFL. More rushing yards than anybody ever in history of the NFL. I don't think that's a record that's going to be broken anytime soon. Emmett, I think, was just a force of nature as a running back as well. He kind of, in a way, I think, is almost underrated when you look at the history books, when you talk of being such a great runner. But Emmett was power and speed. at the same time. I think he was a great blend of both. I think like he could make these great cuts, very subtle cuts, whatever. You talk about Payton with his smoothness and all that. Not quite to that level, but had that as well. Not the power of a Bettis or Eric Dickerson or something like, but he had that as well. Eric, he would run the game. John Madden, I'll never forget. He said the only time he ever shook a player's hand after a broadcast game was when Emmit Smith played in the Giants game with a broken shoulder and actually tore him apart in a broken shoulder. He shook his head, and he's like, he's never done that in all years. I think Emmit Smith was fantastic. Almost the only one I bring it up, but you got to bring up the great lines they had in Dallas. That's the only kind of maybe negative I have on Emmett is like he played around, I think, maybe the greatest offensive line history in the NFL, but that's about it. Emmett was phenomenal. Deion Sanders. Deion, I think, it's fantastic, man. Deion, I think, is the greatest defensive, is the greatest corner. Even to this day, they call it the Deion Sanders coverage. Deion, you put him on an island, man-to-man, no safety help. People don't understand. If somebody got 20 passes in a whole season against Deion, that was maybe later in his career. Deion, I think that you were going to throw at him, it was going to be incomplete, or he's going to take it away. Period. I think like he's very underrated as a player, things like that. And I think like guys like this, there aren't guys in the league like this now. He doesn't care. I don't even think probably now in the league full of zone, like they even have too many guys like a Deion Sanders who could just play man-to-man, no safety help, have a great game. Guys would avoid him. It was fantastic. Deion was tremendous. Business-wise, I think he changed things, though, as well because of his flamboyance and everything off the field. But he was a phenomenal player. Number 6, Joe Montana. Some of y'all may think this is a little low, but I think this is about the right place for Montana. I think Montana was one of the greatest players in the history of the NFL. Nothing but respect for great Joe Montana. Montana was fantastic. 4 Super Bowl wins with the 49ers. I think the offense that he ran was the greatest offense in the history of the NFL. I do think maybe Andrew Reid is challenging that, but the Walsh offense, no question of his success. Accurate. Joe Montana, you would watch him you could watch 20 games with Joe Montana and the ball wouldn't hit the ground. That's how good Joe Montana's accuracy was as well. Didn't have a phenomenal throwing arm, at least from not like an Elway or Marino or something like that. But man, he was like just so accurate, just so consistent as well. Won all the time. Also great in the clutch. Gotta mention that with Joe Montana. So great in the crucial situations. Number 5, one of my dad's favorite players. The come out like a bunch of crazed dogs, Lawrence Taylor, LT. I think fear doesn't do it justice with Lawrence Taylor. People were terrified on the field of Lawrence Taylor. Football players are some of the toughest, biggest guys you ever want to meet, and he had them terrified to go against him. LT was, I think, maybe was the greatest defensive player in the history of the NFL. I don't think there is a guy that similar to Ray Lewis and the Ravens. I think kicked that up a notch. I think he had a little more offense than Ray did as well, but he by himself was the defense. You didn't know. I mean, you just watched him over and over. Had the fear of John Elway and all the quarterbacks. Just made the Pro Bowl. I think it was 13 times or something like that. Lawrence Taylor, I think, was a force of nature, man. So shout out to LT. I am at number 5. Number 4, the late Jim Brown. I think Jim Brown, was the greatest player. I think running back for a long time in the league. Actually played fullback, but he was a running back when he played. Guys ran and played, they played both spots. Both guys got the rock. Jim Brown, I think, is a phenomenal player. I think Jim Brown, was one of the greatest arm tackling. There was no such thing as Jim Brown. Jim Brown was just going to take you and just put you in the stands. The stiff arm. You ever see that stiff arm move? Like in all the Jim Brown, that is what I think of when you think of Jim Brown, the stiff arm, the ability, and everything. So Jim Brown, I think, number 4, I have him on the list. Number 3, Barry Sanders. I just never thought that Emmett Smith was better than Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders, I think, was just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. And when I got the pictures, like, got to have him cutting. Like, him moving is like Barry Sanders would just change direction unlike anything I've ever seen. Run and shoot offense for the Lions, no fullback, no tight end. He would just run by himself. There's nothing like Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders cut, move so quick, so much of a difference maker. Home run every time he touched the ball. The only thing, he was on some bad Lion teams, and so they never really got him any help. I think ultimately that's why he retired. But Barry Sanders, I'd say there was nothing like Barry Sanders in the league now. So Barry Sanders, number 3. Tom Brady, I think, is the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL. I know some of y'all like Joe Montana or whatever, but Brady was just one of one. I think, like, just without him, I think he was so much a big part of what they had. Brady over Montana, he didn't have as much throughout his career. Yes, he had Gronkowski, but he didn't have those great receivers. He had good line play, but, he doesn't have a lot of Hall of Famers on the offensive line. I think Brady, was the smartest player, in the league, as far as his ability and his talent as well. I mean, he did. I think there might never been a guy that did more with less than Tom Brady. Not a phenomenal athlete, but pliable. You heard, played a lot in his career. And I think, number 1, the great Jerry Rice, all-time receiving leader in the NFL. Rice, I think there's nothing like Jerry Rice. I had a conversation a long time ago, and somebody was talking to me about when Jerry Rice was playing. Well, Chris Carter's on the same. Are you kidding? There is no level with Jerry Rice. Watch Jerry Rice training videos, running up mountains, running up things. He just ran past people so easily. He never seemed to ever kick it into high gear. 2 quarterbacks, he took them. He was the biggest reason that Joe Montana and Steve Young got in the Hall of Fame. Number 1, Jerry Rice, greatest ever. Deal with it. There you go. So those are the top 20 players of all time. Next week, we're going to go into back to more to Raven stuff for sure. Ray Lewis, and I think, no question about it, top 15 all-time NFL player. I think no question about it.